Hey guys, good morning. Hope everybody's doing good during the lockdown where everybody's stuck at home. Today we're going to show you how to do a differential service. Today we're going to show you how to do a differential service. I figured this is something that a lot of people are going to do at home. This one already happens to have a aftermarket AEV cover on it, but this would be pretty much the same procedure if you were going to take a stock diff cover off and put on a new aftermarket cover, or just servicing the one you have. Now, some vehicles will have a drain plug in them, which you can just pull it and drain the fluid and fill it back up. We're not going to do that today. We're actually going to pull the cover. I like to pull the cover after a Jeep's been built for a while because we like to see the condition of the gears, we like to see the condition of the fluid, we like to look for broken teeth, things like that. So the only way you can really do that is to pull the cover to actually get in there and take a look at it. So we're going to do that today, and we'll kind of show you how to do that. So if you wanted to tackle this at home, you can do that. So for what you're going to need in order to do this job, we're going to use, I'm going to use an impact gun. I've got a 1/4-inch bit to pull all these diff cover bolts. I have a hammer to tap the cover off. I have a couple of rags. After we get the cover off, we're going to use a angle sander with a Scotch-Brite pad and a little sanding disc, depending on if there's a burr or not, which we'll talk about later. We have a little bit of brake parts cleaner to clean it out. And we're going to use the sealant of choice that you might want to use. We use Permatex Right Stuff because we can put the cover on and return the vehicle to service right away. We can put the cover on, fill it full of oil, and go. We don't have to wait. If you're going to use like the gray, the blue, some of the other silicones that come in little tubes, you're going to have to be a little bit different. Their procedure will be a little different. You'll have to put it on there, let it tack up, put it on, let it dry for so many hours, then put oil in it. So we use the Right Stuff because it allows us to get the job done and send the vehicle out. So follow along and we'll get going. So I like to leave the top bolt on the cover so that this doesn't get out of control when we go to unseal it. Being that this has got really good sealant on it, we'll just come over here, and I just like to break it loose with the hammer, and then usually we can bust it out. And basically we let that drain, and then we can go ahead and pull this last bolt off, and then we can drop this whole cover after the majority of the oil has gone away here. Got our diff cover off, and this is where we are. So usually what we like to do at this point is we'll let the oil, it's going to drain for a few minutes. We like to take a look at the teeth. We like to see how the ring gear is wearing. We do gears here at the shop, and this particular Jeep still has stock gears, so we're probably, looking at, everything is going to be okay in this particular one. But we like to look up at the pinion teeth to make sure they're okay. We like to inspect these teeth to make sure there's no, no chips in the corners of the teeth. We like to make sure it's wearing good and everything. And then once this finishes draining out completely, we'll clean all this off. And then the other thing you have to be careful of is once you take your cover off, depending on what kind of a diff cover you have on here, there will be a little edge down here where the rocks drag on the bottom of the cover, and that'll leave a really pronounced burr right here along the bottom of this edge. and it'll usually correspond with the burr on the lower part of the cover. So what we like to do is, once this finishes draining, we'll come in here with the sander and we'll knock this burr down off the bottom of this, off the bottom right here. And this burr will usually be larger if you're running a stock sheet metal cover. And then also, this particular Jeep has a AEV slider under the diff here. And because that kind of hangs down right here, this actually takes a lot of the brunt. So if you zoom in real quick, you can kind of see the burr that's on this cover right here. That would be similar to the burr you would have right here. So we'll go ahead and we're going to go ahead and get this all cleaned up, and then we'll show you what's next. So for that, we just used a Scotch-Brite pad. If you don't have a Scotch-Brite pad, if you just have a regular sanding pad, you could use that. You just want to be careful not to distort this surface too bad. So usually after we clean it, then we'll come back with the sanding wheel and we'll take off this little lip along the bottom here. And if you notice, I'm just holding this at an angle, so we just take down this lip. We don't want to sand this surface, we just want to clean this surface, but we do want to sand down here along the bottom. So we'll go ahead and we'll let that keep dripping, and we'll clean up the cover and get it ready to go back on. Alright, so we just finished cleaning all the old silicone off of this, and you'll notice that we got a little bit of silicone dust in there. Silicone doesn't really hurt anything, but we're going to clean this really good, and it'll also we've got to clean this out. So what I like to do is just come in here and we just like to use some of the brake clean and just kind of spray all this out so we get a good look at it. A bit more gear oil in here. All right, so we got this guy all cleaned up, and we'll let that brake clean dry for a few minutes. We'll let the remaining oil drain out of this thing so we can put the new cover on. So now I'm going to go over and clean up the diff cover and get it ready to go back on. Okay, so basically to get this cover to be ready to go back on, you wouldn't do this step if you were putting on a new differential cover, but because we're reusing this one, we just have to get all of this old silicone off. So you've got this little edge from where it's sealed. We're just going to, I use my wash tank, but we're just going to get this all cleaned up, and we'll get this cover all nice and clean. So we've got that all cleaned up, and you also want to make sure along this bottom edge, so this is the bottom of the cover, and this will be that edge that has a burr on it from dragging through the rocks. So I want to just take a second and make sure that burr is nice and flat right there. Basically we got that all nice and smooth. We'll go ahead and get this cover all cleaned up, get all the oil and grime off of it. All right, so there we go. We got our cover all cleaned up and ready to go. I'll get this dried off and we'll do the next step. Obviously, we have a little bit of brake clean in here from cleaning that out, but basically what you're looking for is you want your oil to be pretty clear. So this customer happens to keep up on this one really good. So you can see there's still some brown left in this oil. This oil is still in pretty good shape. So I like to change these oils before they get really dirty. And so if you can kind of see in here, you could see a little bit of a kind of a glitter, like right through here in the fluid. You can see a little bit of a glitter in the oil. That's kind of a normal byproduct from normal wear and tear on your ring and pinion as you're driving. You're going to get, you know, little microfiber pieces of metal and things kind of wearing as things wear. So a little bit of this glitter is normal. If you see really heavy flake, like a metal flake paint job or something, then you've probably got a little bit more to worry about. But this little bit here is perfectly normal. And you know, when you run it through your fingers, there's no grit to it and everything. So this oil is still at a really serviceable level. So this Jeep has about 40,000 miles on this diff. And because he keeps up on these oil changes a lot, this one looks really good. If it's mostly a street-driven Jeep and you're not doing a lot of, you know, rock crawling and towing and hard use, I like to do the oil no more than 40. I actually prefer to do it around the 20 to 30 mark. So on a vehicle that gets really heavy off-road use, for instance, like every vehicle that I have, they're constantly on the trail. We're constantly towing. We're rock crawling. We're hill climbing. Things like that. I like to do the oil at no more than 20 to 25, maybe 30 would be pushing it. So for me, I like to do it a little more often. The rear uses 2 quarts, the front uses a quart and a third on a JK. It's really not that much money to take care of your vehicle. So on my really hard rock crawling vehicles that get a lot of work, that one I'll usually do annually or every 2 years at the latest, regardless of mileage. Another thing to keep in mind is if you live somewhere where it's snowing or ice half the year, that moisture can get into your oil, and that's a good reason to service it sooner rather than later. Worry about mileage, do it annually. If you're really hard on your Jeep and you've got, you know, aftermarket gears and you're towing, you live in the snow, you're rock crawling, I usually do those annually because that's just the best way to go to get the contaminants out of the oil, to get the moisture out of the oil, things like that. So this particular vehicle, he lives down the hill for us. We live in the mountains, so everybody's down the hill to us. He's down the hill, and he's just a normal Jeep. Some trail, some highway, not a ton of miles on the Jeep, so he's approaching 40, and his oil still looks pretty good. But if he does a lot of wheeling in one particular year, then he'll come and do it a lot sooner. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and put the silicone on our cover, and I like to just do a small bead around the cover, making sure we go around all the bolt holes. And then a lot of people will say this step isn't necessary, but I like to go around all the holes just in case. It just gives you a better seal, just in case some gets up into the bolts and wants to come through there. We've done it this way and we've done it not this way a bunch of times, and for me, I just like to do it this way. So basically we have a nice small bead on there. Now a lot of people will come back here and they'll mash it up with their finger or whatnot to you know, get it evenly spread around. Mostly when this cover goes down, this is going to mostly spread out anyways, and that's where we got those little beads around there for when we were sealing this up, or when we were cleaning this after we took it apart. But anyway, so we got a nice little bead around there. Everything's set pretty good. So we just want to make sure that our oil is done dripping, which this one is not, just a little bit. So I like to get in there and just... This is another nice thing about the Right Stuff. If you you have a little bit of oil dripping still, you can wipe it out of the way real good, and then you've got a few seconds there before it starts to run again. So we can go ahead and put this cover on, and then we'll take a couple of these bolts. And I won't tighten them all the way down until I get all these screws started. I'll go ahead and get them all started here. So we've got our cover tightened back up. Now if you're doing this by hand, you'll just go around and you'll hand tighten everything until you feel that the bolts are starting to tighten down. I have this little 3/8 gun that I use every day, so I know how much torque is on it when I put it together. So that cover is sealed up and ready to go. So basically you'll have a little bit of silicone you see here that just kind of comes out the end. You can either wipe all that off, or you can just leave it, and then after it dries it'll just kind of peel off of there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fill this. Now the AEV diff cover, they have a kind of a unique arrangement here. So they have a fill cap at the top, which is really nice because it makes pouring the oil in really nice. And if you notice, they've got two plugs on their cover. This one has an F and this one has a rear. And basically what these two plugs are is these are your fill levels. So basically for the rear, you'll take this plug out, you'll fill it in the top, and then when it starts to come out this plug, your level is good. And that level gets you just about the lower part of the tubes here, because as this oil splashes around, it spreads out into the tubes to keep your wheel bearings lubed and your pinion. So in this particular diff cover, they have this. Now if you don't have that on your diff cover and you just have a hole here, you can just fill it till it gets to the hole. Now if you have a Jeep where you've tilted the rear end a lot for a pinion angle, then sometimes these plugs that they put in for the right height may or may not be accurate. So you kind of have to use some judgment, and if you need to, you can kind of adapt. If this thing is tilted really high, then your level will actually be a little higher than the plug. So for me, on these rear diffs, I like to use about 2 quarts. It's going to be somewhere between 1 3/4 and 2 inches. But because this is a stock orientation, there's no CV driveline or anything, we're going to go ahead and just use this fill plug right here. So what we'll do here is we'll just pull that plug out. Okay, and then we'll go get a ratchet. We'll pull this plug, we'll go ahead and fill this diff until it gets to this hole. Also, you want to put a little bit of sealant or Teflon tape on these threads before we put this guy back in. So let me go grab some fluid and we can talk diff fluid. Okay, so let's talk about gear oil really quick. So I believe that the spec for this differential is from the factory. It's 75-140 synthetic. I like to use Valvoline for my diffs. Everybody has their own, their own choice. Torco, Redline, AMSOIL, Mobil One, whatever. As long as you're using a good name brand oil, I think you'll be fine. So a lot of people like the synthetic oil. I like the synthetic oil in a lot of applications. However, I don't like to use the 75-140 synthetic. What I like to use is the 85-140 non-synthetic, also Valvoline. And when I think about what's happening in here, this oil is a little bit thinner. This oil is a little bit thicker. What I like about this oil, and a lot of people in the industry will agree with me, for instance, Curry, when they sell you one of those brand new Rock Jock axles, or Curry 60, basically they're recommending 85-140. The reason I like the 85-140, and I believe the reason they recommend it also, is the 85-140 stays on the gear a little bit longer as it's rotating, and basically it because it's a little thicker and because it stays on the gear a little bit longer, it's actually cushioning your ring and pinion a little bit more, and I actually like that that feature of the non-synthetic oil. So most of our rear differentials in most Jeeps will use 85-140 non-synthetic. Now, if it's a racing application where you don't care how long the ring and pinion lasts, you're going to rebuild it in 2 races, you're trying to keep the temperatures down because you're racing King of the Hammers or something like that, then, you know, maybe some synthetic, and there could be an argument for that. Or if you have a, you know, a tow vehicle and you're pulling a 12 or 15,000 pound trailer, then there could be some arguments for your synthetic fluid. So I'm not here to start that debate, or we can start that debate if you guys want to, if you want to comment below. Me personally, we've had our shop for 22 years. We've done, you know, countless gear changes, and we work on and build a lot of Jeeps. So for me, I like to use the 85-140. So that's what we're going to use. Now this happens to be the JK electric locker. So this particular product is not needed, but if this Jeep that you just serviced has a limited slip differential, a clutch style limited slip, which is going to be like your track locks, things like that, then you would want to use this additive. Now there's a bunch of different additives. This is the one we use at the shop. It's called Equitorque, and basically you would put this in with the oil if you had a limited slip. So a lot of your new JTs that have the track lock rear differential, I guess some of your Sports and Saharas that had a limited slip optional differential, you would use this with the gear oil. What this does is it just allows for the clutches to slip. So sometimes in an older vehicle, if you haven't changed the fluid for a while, you'll start to feel something kind of chattering. And what will happen is those clutches, when they're wearing together, they'll start to grab. And so you'll get kind of a chatter as the clutches go around inside the differential. So that's what this stuff's for. So there's, you know, probably 20 different brands of this. This is the one we carry in here. It's made by CRC Equitorque. So this tube is 4 fluid ounces. So for a regular diff with about 2 quarts in it, then you would just dump this in first, go ahead and put that in, then put your oil. Now, if you're just running a old CJ, you're running a old Jeep truck, you're running maybe old YJs, no fancy diffs, you know, things like that, then you could just go with a standard 80-90 fluid. You don't even need something this thick. We just like this in a high performance application. This Jeep's got big tires, it's rock crawling, it's towing. A lot of things are happening, so that's why we like the 75-140. So before we put this in, we got to get our plug ready. So basically, you just want to take a little bit of Teflon tape to seal up your threads, and you always want to make sure that you roll your plug the right direction when you put on your Teflon tape. I know that's pretty basic, but basically this particular plug has an Allen head on it, so what I like to do is just put it on the Allen head so I can help turn it. And you want to put the Teflon tape on the same direction that you're going to put it on in the plug. So basically we have this plug ready to go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pull this cover off right here, or this cover plug here. Now I really like this AEV diff cover because it's really easy to pour the fluid in. Okay, so as we're filling, we just start to see the oil get a little bit close to the hole here. Okay, so now we have the oil just now running out of this plug, so that level is good. So we'll get our finger over it for a second until we can get our plug started. Alright, clean that off. A little bit of Teflon tape there. Alright, so there you go. So there's a diff change. This procedure is going to be mostly the same depending on what axle you have. There will be a few differences on certain axles, but this is just a regular JK Dana 44, pretty common out there. So you'll see that we've got down to about here with the bottle. So that diff with this plug that AEV set for us, we're about a quart and 3/4. That's about the right amount of fluid for this axle. That makes it really handy. Now, if you don't have this, and you have just a plug down here, and you don't have this nice fill up top like some of the covers, the ARB has this, some of the other ones have the top fill or a dipstick type thing. Sometimes if this plug is a little bit lower because we've tilted this diff, then one of the things you can do is you can put a jack under this side and you can kind of tip it a little bit, and then you can get a little bit more oil in there. Or if you're having to pour it through this hole, sometimes you put your finger over the hole, get a little extra in there if you haven't got quite enough in. That'll change depending on what kind of vehicle, if you have CV drive shafts or whatnot. So there you go. There's servicing your own diff, installing a diff cover. If you have any questions or comments, let us know, and be sure to tune in and check out some more videos we'll post up soon on Jeep 411.